Hello and welcome to Dance Off. I've got Geoff Marsh in the studio with me today. Now, me and Geoff have known each other, Geoff, first of all...
25 years.
25 years, gosh. Well, Geoff has been involved in the theatrical business, theatre, dance, producing, directing, performing professionally, and local amateur dramatics as well. So
Yes.
For many years. Now, I've invited Geoff in as our very first guest on Dance Off. I want to ask you, really, I think the first question I want to know is, how did you get into this? I mean, just interested how you got into like performing and directing and that sort of thing.
It started when I went to school, and I was bullied. Now, don't get too dramatic about that. I was 5, and the guy bullying me was 6. My dad wanted to go and beat this kid up until my mum went, he's a 6-year-old. And all he was doing was just taking my sweets off me. But I didn't want to go to school. And my mum used to drag me to school every single day. And for about the first 6 months, I mean, I was just in shock. And then one day, the teacher said, we're doing a school play. Now, nobody ever explained to me what a school play was. They sort of just assumed you would know. And I was a very compliant kid, and they said, Geoff, we want you to say these words. I did as I was told, because I always did, and I had a memory, so I could remember these things. I didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. And on one day, we went into the hall where we'd rehearsed, and all the lights were off. And I thought, that's a bit strange. But fortunately, the lights were on where we were supposed to stand. So I thought that was handy. And as I went in, I was dimly aware that there were other people in the room. Now, you would know them as an audience. As a 5-year-old, nobody told me. And I started saying my words that I was told to say, and these people laughed. And it was at that moment that I think my life was set. And I was in every school play from that point onwards.
Wow, that really was at a young age. You got onto the stage, and because it is quite a frightening thing. I mean, I've stood on a stage, when we're setting gear up, not with the lights on. I've just looked out to be obviously an empty auditorium, and thinking, how do they do this?
And yes, you're right, the nerves. But 5-year-olds don't have nerves.
No.
6-year-olds, so they'll go out, they'll do anything. And many of the dancing schools know that getting some of your younger kids on stage, running around, you don't know whether they're going to cry, run into the wings, wet themselves, but the audience find it hysterical and the kids have a great time.
That is so true. That is so true. And that's, obviously you had a great time,
yes.
And that's why you carried on. And did you find then that performing did help with confidence? Yeah. Helped to be confident and coping with being bullied?
Absolutely. It was that point where it turned. And it was quite a young age.
It is, yeah.
But they recognised I could do this. And I even got quite stroppy. Being a shy and sensitive kid as I was, I got quite stroppy. One year, I remember, probably again, still in primary school, they decided to do a show and they didn't give me the lead part. So I sabotaged it. And I thought, no, I'm not doing this. I haven't got a lead part. I'm not doing this. This is rubbish. And we were in rehearsals, and I kept saying to the teacher, this is rubbish, miss. This is rubbish. This won't work. This is boring, this. And eventually she said, Geoffrey Marsh, if this show's no good, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do Scrooge, miss. She said, tell me the story of Scrooge. And I could barely remember it, but I told what I could remember. She said, all right, you play Scrooge and we'll do Scrooge instead. I went, that's how life should work.
Awesome. I mean, obviously that carried on through your college life and then university. You went on to do it professionally.
Yes.
That's how you met your wife, isn't it?
It is. It was when I went to uni, almost same as school, massive homesickness. And in my first term, there was somebody who was advertising to put on a panto. I thought, well, I know what panto is. So I went along, and one of the people I met was a guy called Steve Roberts. His name's Steve Spears today, and he's been in the Star Wars movies, he's been in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, he's been in Extras with Ricky Gervais, he's done a lot of stuff. And he and I partnered up very quickly to be a comedy double act whilst we were at uni. and we did this panto together. And a day after we graduated from university, we got our first professional gig, which was doing panto at the Beck Theatre in Hayes, which was Dick Whittington with Barbara Windsor as Dick Whittington. There was Trevor Bannister, who used to be in a TV series called Are You Being Served? And John Craven from John Craven's Newsround.
Right.
And one of the dancers in there was this beautiful girl, Jane Marie Osborne. And over the course of the run of the show, we got together. That was in 1986. And we will have been together 40 years next year.
And you carried on your professional career, but you then started, I would imagine, to build your own business.
My comedy partner and I, Steve, wanted to go and do different things. So I wrote off for any and every job that came up. And there was one in the Guardian newspaper, and it said, can you talk to large numbers of people? I thought, yeah, I can. I've done panto. It said, can you ad lib? I thought, yeah, I've done panto. It said, can you think on your feet? I thought, yeah, I've done panto. And I turned up at this company, and it turned out that this was for 1986. Lloyds Bank Retail Banking was sending 70,000 staff through the same one-day training program. It went on for about 18 months, and they wanted people who could make day 49 seem as fresh as day one. So actors were actually a very good choice. And I did that for 18 months. They paid all my hotel bills. They paid for all my food, all my travel. It was a regular income. And I was still standing on stage telling jokes. I thought, I don't think I'll go back to the theatre.
But you did, because while you're running your successful business, well, you actually started your own business,
yes,
didn't you?
Yes.
And then in the late 80s, I actually can't remember when, no, mid-90s, you started, well, you took over Stage Struck.
Took over Stage Struck in 1999.
And that's when we met, wasn't it?
That's right.
Because I was filming and producing videos for dance and theatre schools at that time.
Yeah.
And I was doing the Stage Struck for Dave Wainwright. And then, of course, when you took over, and then you carried on. But you actually... I hate to use the word improved on it, because I think Dave Wainwright, bless him, did a great job. But you went a different route, really, with the actual, from what I can remember, it was all still a lot of fun, but you introduced a lot more humour into it than what it was before. It was just a group of, local people doing their amateur dramatic stuff, dancing, singing. But you introduced a lot more humour, because you then became a double act, didn't you?
That's
a sort
true.
of a local version of... I wouldn't like to say Laurel and Hardy, because that was like thin and...
Yeah, one of them was thin and one of them was fat. We were both fat. Yeah, I know what you're saying, Bob. I understand that. I get that, yeah.
In fact, Geoff rang me up many years ago and said, Bob, I want to produce a DVD. And I want to call it Two Fat Fools. And that came about because of Ken Jail and yourself performing on stage, and you two were great.
Thank you.
You two, I mean, you were so great. I had real trouble filming these shows because I'd be in tears with laughter. And it's like, I'm trying to film this thing, and all I'm doing is, and there was, I mean, you wrote pretty much all of it, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, Stage Struck in its history started because a local singing teacher, Vera Bennett,
right,
had a lot of pupils, and she was teaching them all to sing, including me, and she was teaching them all to sing, and then she wanted a format for them to be able to perform. So she started with her husband, David Wainwright, Stage Struck, and they ran it very well, and they put on some big shows at the Wyvern, Gypsy, King and I, Most Happy Fella, some really big shows at the time. And then sadly in 1991 Vera passed away, which meant the singing school had gone. And Stage Struck continued for a little while, but it sort of lost its purpose.
Right.
Because it was always designed as a showcase for the singing students, no singing teacher. So David kept it going for a little while. And then he asked me and my wife, Jane, if we would take it over. We just had a baby. I was running my business. Jane wasn't performing, and we had some time to be able to go and do it. But clearly, we're not singing teachers. So when we took over this group, I think at the time there were about 30 people in the group, of all ages. Ken Jell was the eldest at that time, in his 70s, and we had the youngest, I think, was 7 years old. So it's a really wide range of ages there. And the problem was, well, what's the purpose? What are you doing this for? You're not doing it for pupils. Now, I grew up on variety shows. I grew up on end of pier shows. One of my favourite things used to be to go to Blackpool with my parents in the summer, and you would see at the Blackpool Opera House, you'd see Cannon and Ball. You'd go on the pier and you'd see Little and Large. You go somewhere else and you'd see Des O'Connor, and really great shows. And I'd worked enough of those shows myself to understand the variety element. So you'd have a pianist, and you'd have a singer, and you'd have a dance troupe, and you'd have a magician, and you'd have a comic, and you'd have some puppets. And I loved those shows. So when we did Stage Struck, I said that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do variety shows. Were we the best singers or the best choir? No, there were far better choirs out there. Were we the best dancers? Really, no. But what we could do was we did a lot of variety, and you never quite knew what was coming next in the shows. And that was our focus.
Yeah, but one thing that really stood out to me with your shows was there was no black holes. There's nothing worse in an audience when the curtains close and they're fumbling around changing scenery. I think, why don't you just put somebody in front of that curtain?
That's right.
Just to talk to the audience.
That's right.
And that's one, and because I've been involved in, as you know, in shows for years and years, and that's one thing I really hate when you're filming a show and you get these black holes. For heaven's sake, just put a compare on anything.
Well, if you take what a black hole is, so a number finishes. Everybody stands on stage, the audience applauds, the lights go off, and then everybody sort of shuffles back. But the people who are pulling the curtains have to wait for everybody to shuffle back so they don't trap them in front of the curtains. But of course, they're all trying to shuffle back in the dark,
right?
Which is why you get these big black holes.
Right.
And what we did, we said, with just a little bit of creativity, you could do so many things. So sometimes we ran one thing into another. We'd have everybody on the stage, and then we went into the next number, which, if I remember rightly, for one of our shows, was a scene about the French Foreign Legion, and it was having a medical. It was a sketch. It was having a medical for the French Foreign Legion. So everybody's in these hippie costumes. I think we'd just done a number from Sweet Charity, and they all came with wigs and brightly coloured costumes. And three of my guys, at the end of the number, before the lights went down, they walked forward. Because the lights were still on, the company could clear very quickly. The three guys walked forward, the curtains closed behind them, and they started to do a striptease. And all they did was took off these hippie costumes,
right,
leaving them in vest and shorts,
right,
which led straight into the medical sketch.
Right.
So you never even noticed that one thing moved into another.
No,
and just with
clever.
a little bit of creativity, you could do it.
Yeah, very clever. So with Stage Struck, obviously Stage Struck was going, you run it for a good number of years, but I will know now that Jane is involved in Stage Struck. But the children, Sam and
Danny.
Actually, as a difference, your business name, I never knew this for ages until you told me, but Dan Sam is named after your two daughters. I thought that's beautiful.
You didn't know that Dan Sam was named after my daughters Danielle and Samantha?
No.
How weird. Honestly, I kept it a surprise, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, it actually was you that told me that. But family affair. Now, Dan she's the eldest, and then Sam is the youngest. So they must have got involved in Stage Struck, I'm sure.
Yeah, they did. I think we never took anybody under the age of 7.
Right.
Because, again, school, staying up late at night, our rehearsals ran till 10 o'clock on a weeknight. So, 5 and 6, or even 7-year-olds struggled a little bit. But we took children from the age of 7. And what we tried to make sure they did was, we had people, as I said, Ken was always our oldest, and he started at 70. So you had this massive age range, but we always insisted that the adults and the children worked together. That was quite important for us. You don't get it so much these days, but if we taught a dance routine, they all did it together. And in one way, Bob, that we saw stuff that was really interesting. You'd have a 50-year-old teacher, for example, who was part of our group, going to a 10-year-old kid and saying, I can't quite pick up that dance step. Can you just show me that dance step again? Because the kids picked it up quicker than the adults did. So think about what that did for the confidence of that 10-year-old directing a teacher.
Yeah, massive.
And we started to notice that. So when my kids were old enough, they both joined the company. And over the years, they both became very, very good performers. Danny has a beautiful voice, a fantastic voice.
Oh, amazing.
And Sammy is a really funny actress. Her expressions on her faces are just absolutely amazing, as well as looking beautiful. And then gradually, Danny also took over the choreography for us and started writing some of the sketches. And the last panto we did together, she was co-writer with me. But when you say a family affair, again, and I say this for use for your audience, when you go to do a show at the theatre now, there are so many restrictions and forms you have to fill in. And you've got to have chaperones, and they've all got to be, is it DBS checked? I never know what the latest term is. But they've all got to be checked, and the chaperones have got to be approved, and they can't be part of the performance. And eventually, we got to a stage where everybody... one of my final shows, I had the form from the theatre and it said, you need chaperones. I said, why is that? And they said, well, you've got children in the show. I said, I have 5 children in the show. Well, you need chaperones. I said, okay, let me just take you through the structure of my company. You've asked me, was it a family affair? I said, one of the children has her aunt in the show, her father in the show, her cousin in the show. The second child has her grandfather backstage, her uncle backstage, an uncle on the stage, and an aunt on the stage, and her mum's also in the chorus. I said the third child has got her dad on the stage and his brother on the stage, all adults. And I went through all 5. I said, chaperones?
Yeah, but I mean, we all understand the principle behind it and the reasoning for it, but there has to be common sense applied with certain...
chaperones I agree with. My point there is, when you ask me, is it a family affair? I made sure that it was a family affair, because a lot of the parents got to share a hobby with their kids.
Which is great, which is wonderful.
They both loved it. I used to have parents who used my rehearsals as a punishment. Now, one of our performers was a guy called Matt Pigeon. Matt went on to do some amazing things. He became a world tap dancing champion thanks to a company called Tap Attack. He was with the Wilkes Academy. He's been in Mamma Mia in the West End. Most recently, he was in Magic Mike, the cabaret at the West End. When he joined us, he was 7 and a little naughty boy occasionally. And his mum said to me, she said, I use your rehearsals as a punishment. I say to him, if he's not good, he can't come down to rehearsal. I said, don't do that. I want them at rehearsals. She said, it's the only lever I've got. She said, he loves being in the show so much. It's the only thing I've got that will keep him on the short and narrow.
Do you feel there is still a market for theatres these days? I mean, there's a lot of talk about people aren't going to the theatre. We live in Swindon, obviously, and the theatre in Swindon's been around for many, many years. And there's been so much talk about building a new theatre, but then councillors say there isn't the money for theatres. People don't go to. Do you feel that people still go out to the theatre?
It's a tricky one because there's no one component or answer to that. It's like a lot of different puzzle pieces.
Right.
Firstly, in Swindon, we're limited by the size of the theatre. So the Wyvern holds 600 seats, which means you cannot bring the really top shows to Swindon, because in order to make the money on those top shows with 600 people in the audience, the tickets would cost £100.
Yeah, or you've got to have a show on for like 20 nights or whatever, and that wouldn't work for the tour.
And they can go and see the same show in Oxford or Bristol or Birmingham or London for half that price.
Right.
So that's one issue. That's why the talk of building the new theatre makes sense. So you build it with slightly bigger seats. I think the industry itself has to ask what it's there for. Now, I used to have big arguments at university, which is entertainment for entertainment's sake,
right?
Which I believe in. I believe people need just to go and smile, have fun, relax and enjoy themselves. But I'm not sure that's widely held view within the industry, which is theatre has to be political. That doesn't mean Conservative or Labour, it means it has to have a message. It can't just be fun. It's got to have a message to it. And I think audiences sometimes get fed up with being lectured. They want to go and enjoy the thing.
They do, yeah.
They don't, you know, when I used to go and watch Little and Large or Cannon and Ball, or I used to go and watch Des O'Connor, I'm not aware of there was any message to it. I just laughed until I cried.
I think that really does apply, though, with the local amateur dance schools. Now, I've heard comments where people say, oh, those kids didn't dance very well on the stage. But it really doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter how good the young kids or even the older kids are. If they're getting the courage to go up on the stage and enjoying themselves, and the audience, particularly predominantly parents, are enjoying it anyway, does it really matter as long as everybody is having a good time?
Totally agree. It's just theatre. Doesn't matter if they're brilliant. Doesn't matter if they're the best in the world. It's just theatre. It's just a couple of hours of people pretending and having a bit of fun. And if you see somebody with some talent, pretty good. I have cried more at watching my kids walk onto stage as a little dog running around than I have at some of the greatest shows I've ever seen.
Indeed. And on a different subject, who is your favourite performer, actor, singer, whatever?
I mean, I've got loads.
Right.
You know, I don't. Yes, I think you can see up there. You see Stan Laurel up there, and Laurel and Hardy were undoubtedly the world's greatest double act.
I would agree with that.
In the sense that traditionally a double act is a straight man and a funny man, whereas with Laurel and Hardy they were both hysterically funny. There is no straight man. They are both funny. Ollie is just as funny.
But that was with you and Ken, though, wasn't it? There wasn't really one was funnier than the other. I think most people probably saw you as the straight man and Ken as but there were so many sketches where it kind of role swapped.
Yes.
You know, or where you were both equally, you know, funny. Actually, on the subject, I need to ask. I don't think I've ever asked you this. Was it ad-libbed, or was the ad-lib sections that looked ad-libbed scripted in the script to make it look like it wasn't scripted?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Right. That's clever. That is so clever.
Let me explain. Let me explain. Because you asked so many parts of that question, and the answer to all of them is yes. For those who've never seen us, Ken Gell and I did a double act in Stage Struck, and we did it for about 25 years. Now there's an age difference of an age difference of 30 years between us. And that was part of the comedy. He was the old doddering fool, although absolutely not in reality. And I was always the brash, big-headed, arrogant, bossy one. And that was they were the characters. But the joke nearly always rebounded on me. It nearly always did. And I wrote them, so I could never be offended by them. I mean, when we played Ugly Sisters in Panto, I said, "You're old," to Ken, because he was 30 years older than me. I said, "You're old. You're my much older sister." He said, "Well, how dare you?" He said, "The other day, somebody came and said to me, I got the body of a 30-year-old. And I said to him, and what did he say about your 50-year-old bum?" And Ken looked at me and said, "He never mentioned you." So the joke always bounced back on me, and that was very much what we did. And did we learn it? We never wrote anything down. There was never a written script as such. No, what we did was we had an idea, and then we'd meet up in my office, or we'd meet up in Ken's flat, and we'd just talk through ideas, and then gradually we'd end up with a skeleton. And there were jokes and there were punchlines to the jokes. Like Ken said, he said, "You know, yesterday I was looking out my window and a German Shepherd came and did a big poo on our lawn." He said, and then in the afternoon he brought his dog. So there were occasionally some blatant jokes, and some of them were the situations. So we had those, but we listened to each other. because occasionally one of us would slip up or make a mistake over something. And when we did that, both of us had been doing it long enough to pick up. So they were where the ad-libs came from.
Ah, right.
So there was always a skeleton, but there was a lot of ad-libs, and sometimes the ad-libs were the funniest bits.
They were, yeah.
There was a point, and we trusted each other a lot. We always said we never got laughs individually. We worked together to get the laughs. But what would happen was I recognised that the rhythm of a joke went like me saying da-dum 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 da-dum, and then Ken would go da-dum. He only said da-dum, the two words, the end of the gag.
Yeah.
He'd get the laugh and everybody go, he's so funny. I did all the work. I was the one learning all the lines. But we described it as football, which was my job to get it somewhere near the goal.
Right. I mean,
and it was his job to knock it in.
Knock it in, yeah.
He was the striker. And I don't know enough about football, I was everybody else.
Right.
It was my job to get it somewhere in the goal area. And we never competed. We never fell out. I never tried to stop him getting laughs. He never tried to stop me. We worked together. And if we got a laugh together, we were just so happy about it.
Wow. Yeah, it's so true. And it always worked.
Mostly it worked.
It always did work. So Laurel and Hardy, so obviously there's others as well.
Morecambe and Wise.
Of course.
But probably my own personal biggest inspiration was Bruce Forsyth. He could play every instrument, he could dance. I can sing, but all of that. But what I loved was when I used to watch as a kid the Generation Game. And his ability to be able to take ordinary members of the public and talk to them in such a way that he could make them funny.
Right.
He would make you would laugh at the crazy things they were doing, and his ability to work an audience was just second to none. People who watched Strictly Come Dancing later, watching him then, you didn't see Bruce at his best. To do that, you had to see him do the Generation Game in the 70s and 80s, and there he was the master. And I think that was certainly always.
And his one-liners were superb.
Oh yeah. But his ability to work an audience, he knew how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always loved. And even now in my job, my proper job when I'm presenting and running training courses, is that ability to talk to.
It is incredibly important to be able to, particularly when you're doing it live, not so much what we're doing here, but when you're doing something live and you've got a live audience, you've got to be able to react to them. If they're not laughing at something, you've got to be able to, I say read the audience. Haven't you? And the thing is, you can't even see them generally with all the lights on the stage.
No.
You're going by,
you sense
it, and you're going by their reactions as well, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, sometimes sitting on and it happened a few times in Stage Struck, there were times where the warmth from the audience was so tangible, it was palpable, that I never felt as comfortable in my life as I would do sometimes on the stage with an audience that were really enjoying themselves. It didn't happen every show.
No.
But when it happened, you knew that even the greatest professionals would have killed for that kind of thing.
You also knew how long a show should be. Because, I've done some shows where they're like only an hour long. You think, well, that weren't long enough. I've done some shows. We did one up in the Midlands. It was like 4 hours long with 2 intervals. It's like, that's just a bit, bit too much.
I've been in shows like that. Yeah. When I was 16, I was in a dancing school show, and it wasn't very good. It was bad. It was in Cleethorpes, on the pier at Cleethorpes. It was not good. And they given me a sort of filler bit where I had to come on to pretend to juggle some oranges. And every time I came on to juggle the oranges, they kicked me. I'm only 16. They kicked me off. I must have had 20 spots like this. By the time the eventual end of the show came, about 11 o'clock, nobody gave a snuff. They were just to chuck those damn oranges away, will you? And the only people left were the parents waiting to take their kids home at the end. There was nobody else.
Dear. So do you feel that there is, going into it full time? So you're doing it as an amateur, you're doing, and then you think, I'm going to be a full-time actor, singer, dancer, performer, whatever. Do you think that's a good? I guess that's a silly question to ask, really, because it depends on whether you're getting the work, doesn't it? But do you think there is, it's a good career to go into?
Well, as you say, it depends on whether you're getting the work or not. Don't go into it thinking it's all going to be glamour.
Right.
Because it really isn't.
No.
There are a lot of horrible people in the business, some lovely people in the business as well, but there are a lot of horrible people in the business. It is a business. You will still have bosses. You will still have people telling you what you can do and what you can't do. I remember in the Panto where I met my wife, the company manager came to me, and I was, say, in my 20s, and he said, "There seems to be a relationship between you and one of the dancers starting. No, you can't have that. You can't date one of the dancers."
Kidding me?
No, I'm not.
Oh my gosh.
He disappeared. And the guy who was one of the comics in it, a guy called Jeff Stevenson, who was he was in Only Fools and Horses a few times, and he came to me afterwards and he went, "Ignore him." He said, "If comics didn't marry dancers, comics would all be single." He said, "Just ignore him."
Good job you did ignore him.
It is a good job I did.
Yeah, gosh, yeah, wow.
So it's not necessary. And we hear about things like the Me Too and the casting couch and the Weinsteins and people like that. There are lots of people who want to take advantage of you because they can make money from you.
Right, yeah.
And as long as your eyes are open to that, I think a good piece of advice was Michael Parkinson in his chat show, and he said he had David Beckham on his show, and he always liked to go down to the green room just to interview people before the show started. And he went down to David Beckham's dressing room when David Beckham was really just emerging as the super sports star that he was. And he went into David Beckham's dressing room and it was full. There were so many people there. And Parkinson thought, "Oh God, this lad's got so many hangers on, he hasn't got a chance." And then David Beckham said, "Oh, Mr. Parkinson, can I introduce to you? This is my nan, that's my mum, that's my dad, that's my Uncle Steve." And Parkinson went out and went, "It'll be all right. It'll be all right." Because you need that family around you.
I mean, it can be a very cool industry. Now, I can think of two examples. Karen Carpenter.
Yes.
Now, her and her brother were becoming very successful. She read a note, or was in a paper, a local paper, that said, "Great voice, shame about she's overweight," and she went on
She got anorexia.
Got anorexia, then died of a heart attack based on her anorexia. And then you look at Lena Zavaroni.
Lena Zavaroni is the most tragic case.
Very tragic.
Which you and I will remember. Many others won't.
No.
She started on a talent show, and she was a little girl with an incredibly powerful voice.
Right. Yeah.
And she got an agent following the talent show, and her agent insisted that Lena Zavaroni came and lived with the agent away from her parents.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Right.
And Lena Zavaroni went all over the world. She sang with Frank Sinatra and many others. Good friend of Pollyann Tanner.
Of course, because Lena Zavaroni, what was her name?
Bonnie Langford.
Bonnie Langford is a patron of Tamworth School of Dance, isn't she? Yeah.
They were all around the same ages.
Yeah.
And again, she desperately needed that support network of people who loved her, not just people who wanted to make money out of her.
Right, and that was very sad.
Yes, and she died of anorexia at a very young age.
And I say with Karen Carpenter, very, very sad. Yeah. Beautiful. It's still my favourite female singer of all time. I mean, beautiful. Super. You know. So there we go, Geoff. I think we've covered a fair bit. I have no idea how long this is, but I mean, hey ho, who cares? People can dig in, listen to it or switch off or whatever they want to do.
Who knows?
So who knows? Geoff, thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
I enjoyed that.
Love to invite you in again. So there we go. That was Geoff Marsh, and I'd love to thank everyone for watching this. Now, if you are interested in this channel, please subscribe if you're watching it on YouTube, and if you're listening to it on your favourite podcast app, don't forget to subscribe. So keep an eye out and stay tuned for the next podcast. I'm not sure who's the next guest, but stay tuned for more. Thanks very much, and once again, Geoff, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thanks, Bob.
Cheers for now. Bye.